I'm your host, Erica Cole, and I'm joined here on this panel by our two lovely expert guests, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves in just a moment. Last week, we discussed our introduction to financial literacy, where we spoke about how it's important as individuals and how it also affects us as community. Today, we will actually be discussing one of my favorite topics, financial literacy, once again. But this time, we'll be discussing how it affects us as individuals, particularly in marriage, and how that helps us build strong family units. So I'm going to turn it over to our guests so they can introduce themselves and tell you a little bit about their background and how they're experts in the financial space. Starting with you.
Hi, my name is Maya Byfield. I am a biology professor, so I do not have any experience in financial background, but I do have success in it. So everything that I'm going to talk about today is something that I've experienced, and I'm living what I'm speaking, and I want to share the financial success that I've had.
Wow. So you have a testimony to share with
I got a
us.
testimony.
That's awesome. And who are you, sir?
My name is Kevin Plochet. I am a licensed professional in the finance and accounting space for over 22 years. So I bring a wealth of knowledge and experiences as well as Dr. Byfield said as well.
Other
That's
people want to
awesome.
shout me out more than I.
That's right. That's
You
right.
earned
Appreciate
the,
it, Kevin.
you earned it. You earned it. So we have to. That's no small feat.
Absolutely.
So you're giving props where it's due. And so I'm going to be asking some of the same questions of the both of you, but your perspective obviously is going to be a little bit different from his perspective. One expert, one practical, one single, one married. So just to kind of get a well-rounded understanding of some of the things that I'm going to be asking for our audience. Okay.
Awesome.
Awesome. So, first question. As a Christian and finance expert, because I'm still calling you expert, Maya, how do you define biblical literacy? Biblical stewardship, and how do you think that plays into the context of relationship and marriage?
In terms of the word steward, when I was a kid, my mom, I was the only child, and I would come to Florida. I'm from New York. I would come in the summers, but she would send me on the plane by myself. Yeah, and as young as 6 years old, I was traveling that young alone.
Wow.
But what they would do was they would put me with the stewardess. That's what they called the flight attendants back then. They called them the stewardess, meaning they were in charge of me from the time I got on the plane until they brought me to my aunt. I don't know if they still do that now, but that's what they did back in the day. Um, Meaning they were putting charge of me. God has put us to be in charge of his resources. So biblical stewardship is to be in charge of God's resources that he has for you. And it's critical that you have that in a single position as well as in marriage.
Do you think it differs?
I think it differs in terms of a shared core value with the marriage versus individual. It's your own vision. So that's why it's so important to know what your core values are so that you're making sure that you're sharing it with your spouse
That's true.
before marriage.
That's a good point. And what about you?
Um, so great point. And with biblical stewardship, when we were here the last time, we did talk about what that really means, and we talked about the 10 financial mistakes, and the first one was ignoring God's ownership. Right. So first and foremost, we have to remember that we don't own anything. Right. We're managing. Right. So what that means is we don't own it, but we're taking care of it. Right. Now, if we're taking care of something, we want to understand how to do that, right? And not wing it. Well, like with what we have. So it takes a level of understanding. It takes a level of learning to understand how to manage something. As in this context, we're talking about finances. So you have to take the moment to learn how to manage it before you can actually manage it.
Hmm, that's good. So being in charge and managing what you don't really own, but God has given to you to be in charge of, so to speak. And you said we have to learn how to manage. So, how early on do you think that should start?
My mother taught me tithing as soon as I started getting money. So even if I got $1, 10 cents went to the Lord. So
How young were you?
I guess I can't remember how it was so long I can't remember. Maybe as far as maybe 7,
Hmm.
I would say 7. You know, in church we have children's offerings. That the children should give, right? I remember learning how to do that from that early. It's critical because you learn the context of percentages. How much goes to you? How much goes to God? And once you can just start doing math in your brain that young, you will be doing that forever in multiple ways. Percentages. How much can go to God? How much can go to this? How much can go to that? Budgeting to me is foundational, and you learn that through tithing, and I learned it from that young. Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely, and those are the um, foundational steps as children to help them understand, first of all, that from a biblical standpoint, who we serve, right? And then we also teach them a little bit about responsibility as well. That even though you may not have earned this, but we don't own it, so we're giving some back to God. So what I taught my kids when they were younger to get the concept was there's 4 things that you do with money every time you get it. You give some to God, you save some, right?
Yep.
You can spend some, and then you give some away.
So the toss method: tithes, offering, saving, and spending. Do I have that right?
Some
Something like
similar,
that.
right? Something
Okay.
similar. So, and then as they get older, we get into percentages, right? We're actually doing the 28 fundamental beliefs from a youth perspective, and that's one of the things it talks about. That there's a difference between tithe and offering, right? What the differences are, and what it does when we do give back our tithe, and we share our offering, right? That we get blessed by doing that. So it steps to it, but you're teaching them from early, as soon as they get money. So not as soon as they start working, but as soon as they start getting money, because they get money from grandparents, birthdays, Christmas, all that stuff. And you want to teach them that it's a gift that you're getting, right? It's a gift. You didn't earn it. It's an increase. So we still need to understand how to steward that, right? Yeah.
That made me think about something. Something I think might be a little bit controversial. Kind of just came up. So two things. I'm a parent, so it made me think about my son, who I'm often trying to teach everything that I can, especially regarding finances. I'm very passionate about finances, and one of the things that I'm always on him about is saving, saving his money, not letting it burn through his fingers. He wants to spend every single penny that he gets, but he just reminded me that I actually have not really been onto him as much about offering and about tithing. He knows the concept of tithing. He sees me tithe. He sees me offer, but I am just not as adamant about it with him. So thank you for reminding me of that. And then the second thing, you mentioned something. And it sparks a memory about a debate I had with someone about whether or not we should give tithe of our income tax return. So I'm kind of interested to know what your perspective is on it, because you said something that kind of sparked a memory of that. So
So with that,
said the increase.
the
To make
first
it clear for the audience, they said that to give on the increase. So would that be considered an increase?
so the first thing the first right. So the first thing I would say is allow the Holy Spirit to guide you on that,
Yeah.
right? And then there's two concepts there. One concept is, am I tithing on my gross, or am I tithing on my net? Because that plays a part in, when you get a return, what do you do with it, right? I'm gonna go. That's as far as I'm gonna go, right? Because I know that
Okay.
that can be tricky there.
What about you, Maya?
You shouldn't be getting the tax return. You need to change your W-4.
Well,
That's what I'm
well,
saying on
that's
that.
why I
First of
said
all, everybody ain't able. Not everyone is a salaried employee. And
absolutely.
some people have a very low tax what is it called? Oh my goodness, I'm losing Mr. Finance.
Tax bracket, you mean, or
No, it's another word. Tax liability or something like that, where they don't really have to pay as much because they have, maybe they have a lower income or
oh,
they have more
deductibles, you mean?
children. Yeah,
Yeah.
something like that. I
So
can't think of the word. It'll come back to me later.
okay,
Tax liability. I think that's what I'm looking
yeah.
for. Yeah. So I actually have done both. I've tied on my gross and I've tied on my net, and then I've tied when I've gotten a tax return. What I do now, I tithe regularly on my net, and I give a percentage, an actual percentage for offering rather than just like whatever I feel. And then when I get my income tax return, if I get one, Maya, because it really depends, then I give a tithe of that as well. And my thought about it is just simply that I just know that everything belongs to God. And so whatever I have, I'm just gonna give him a portion of it, regardless of if I've already given from that portion or not. If he's blessed me to be able to get something back, I just want to give it back. And part of that comes from knowing what this particular ministry does with our money. I know the church itself doesn't necessarily operate from our tithe, but it goes to the larger conference. And, I know a little bit about what they do. And then also on the offering, that's why I always give a percentage because the church gets such a small amount of money to have to work with. So that's just how the Lord convicted me. So
Absolutely.
just a little tidbit. So I'm not gonna get into y'all's personal finances. But it does bring me to my next question since we kind of talk about family and business and children and stuff like that. So should couples run their households as a business when it comes to finances?
I would say, I did get that question. I would say, not your entire household. There should be aspects of your household that you should run like a business, especially your finances, right? And what we mean by run it as a business is with businesses, they do what's called a profit and loss statement, meaning what we brought in, what we gave out, and what is left over. Right? Simple profit and loss statement, because they need to understand, from a business perspective, if they're having profits or not. Right? We have to do the same thing. And our household running at a deficit, or is it running at a surplus?
Is that what they call a balance sheet?
That's part of the accounting financial statements. You have a balance sheet, you have income statement, statement of cash flows, things of that nature. But understanding understanding what comes in, what goes out on a monthly basis, and seeing if you're in a deficit or in a surplus. That's the basics of running a business, basics of running a household. So yeah.
How does that tie into budgeting, Maya? If well, first of all, do you agree? You do? Okay. So
Yeah,
how does that tie
I
into
would know
budgeting?
because I'm single, so I'm not gonna talk about I disagree. I run my
Well,
life.
you're
My
aspiring to
I
have a family, right?
Yes, and I run
Okay.
my single financial life like a business.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
So since I do that, hopefully, if I am blessed with a husband, that would be a core value that we
When you
share.
are, because that's something you desire.
Thank you, Erica.
Yes.
Appreciate it. Um, how does it lie concept in the concept of budgeting?
Yeah, because I heard you mention budgeting earlier,
Hmm.
and you actually answered one of my questions, which was going to be, does it matter for you to have good financial stewardship as a single individual? You just confirmed that it does. And
Absolutely.
so, since budgeting seems to be like one of your pillars of financial literacy and financial stewardship, how does having a family business structure when it comes to your finances play into budgeting? Because Mr.
Kevin
Kevin.
Shay,
Plochet, yes.
thank you, Poche. I knew I was going to mess it up there.
You said it
You
right.
got it.
Just mentioned that one of the key things that you do is you look at your profits and your losses.
Mhm.
So, how does that tie into budgeting?
It ties into budgeting because you predict a budget is a prediction of what you will spend in the year, in the month. And I'll talk about in terms of myself. I when I graduated from graduate school, I I got a brand new car. I had no concept of budgeting. I got a nice sports car, and I was put onto this concept of the Mint app. It was not no longer in charge. It's not no longer there. But and it told me about assets. It told me about liabilities. And I put all my assets and liabilities, of which I had no assets and all liabilities. And I was negative $4,000.
That's good.
My
Was
net
was it
worth.
as your net worth?
That was good.
Negative 4,000 was my net worth
Wow.
Coming out of college,
coming out of grad school.
that was
Even
good.
with
Which is
student
pretty
loan
good
debt and everything.
because I had student loan debt, but I only
That's
had
really good.
college student loan debt. For grad
Okay.
school, I didn't go to. Shout out to scholarships and
Amen.
they paid my way for grad school. So
That's awesome.
negative 4,000 was good for a PhD. It was,
was.
Absolutely.
but it was still negative $4,000.
Absolutely. I got you.
And I was like, what? I had no concept of net worth and negative. When I saw the negative, that's when I learned about, well, you have to have more assets than liabilities. And they said, now you got to do budget. You have to set yourself up to spend this amount of money to get yourself up out of that negative and be on the positive side of net worth. That's and I learned how to do percentages when I was 7, but I didn't know exactly how to connect it to my life when I was making decisions.
That's
Yeah.
a very good point.
Mhm.
Kind of goes back to what we talked about earlier about when do you teach children about finances. So since you couldn't really connect the dots, although you had access or you were exposed to these concepts, how when do you think is an important time to actually fully involve children in the finances of the family so they can connect the dots?
So I believe it's super early. So as soon as they can understand math, they should be involved in the finances. They don't have to be totally involved right off the bat. You can give them little bits and pieces, but by the time they're ready to go off on their own, they should know everything. And that's one of the things that I would say that parents often neglect to do because they may feel ashamed of their own finances to say, well, I'm not going to share with them my bills and my problems. But it makes it, well, first of all, I would say get yourself a financial education first. If you have that, if that's the issue why you're not sharing it with your kids, get yourself a financial education. Once you do that, share everything with them because what it does is it exposes them to what real life looks like. Remember what she said. She didn't know until she had to do it herself, which should never be the case. If you have parents that say, okay, let me show you this because I want this to make sense to you when you're doing it on your own, right? So being okay with the fact that you're not perfect as parents, we don't get it right. We all make mistakes, especially when it comes on to money. It's okay, but you show them that early so they can see. Show them the mistakes
So they can learn from them.
so they can, because here's the thing with that. If you show them a pothole, they're not going to drive down that road. They're going to say, okay, I know how to avoid that because my dad had that problem, my mom had that problem, right? But if you don't expose them to it, they're going to hit that pothole just like you did, right? So it's very, very important. That's one of the things, especially because my family are, I mentioned before, I grew my family is from Jamaica, right? So when they came here, they didn't understand how money works here, so they made a whole lot of mistakes, right? But the problem with that you compound it by not sharing it with your kids, right? So then they go out there and do the same thing, and it's like, man, I could have told you that was not a smart move, but so
And I mean, part of me only having negative $4,000 is because I had no credit card debt.
Thank God.
So my mother did guide me enough in the context of saying, when you go to college, no credit cards.
Mhm.
She did give me a lot of no's, so I didn't make a lot of mistakes that way. But she didn't give me a lot of yeses.
She didn't
Like,
prepare you.
well,
with
I don't want to say
information.
she didn't. She gave me what she had.
Right. I was gonna say that.
She gave
So
me what
gave
she
you her
had.
level of financial education.
Yeah, she gave me her level of financial education. Yep.
To Kevin's point, that was a good point. You have to first be financially educated and then share that with your children. So how does one acquire a financial education? I mean, I know there's probably many, many ways, but if from your perspective, and then also from your perspective, Maya.
So I mentioned the last time we were here that you should have a team around you. Every person, every family should have a team around them. A tax person, a financial person, a real estate person, a legal person, and a spiritual person.
Okay, so what about the family that doesn't have that circle?
You,
The
the,
family that's working class.
no, no, and that what I'm saying that's not a wealthy person's concept. That's not a poor person's concept. That should be everyone's concept. The reason why I said now, I also mentioned that it doesn't have to be a professional relationship. Just have that person that you can call and ask questions, right? So if you have someone you grew up with and they're now a lawyer,
Mhm. Call that
call
person.
that person and talk to them about questions that you may have on a certain situation, right? Use the resources that you do have. We have books out there. We are
So
just
start in the
talking.
church
we-
because
The
a
church,
lot of
the
people may
black
not
church
know
has.
anybody personally. That's kind of what I was saying. So not to say, that working class is so
right.
different, but just saying that sometimes the network doesn't look the same among someone who's poor because maybe everybody they went to school with is also poor. So I guess the church would be like the first place.
Yeah, that's the beauty of the black church.
Amen.
Yeah.
The black church has the the garbage man and the CEO in the same pew. That's the beauty of it.
Yeah.
Now, if you're willing to network
Be vulnerable.
and be vulnerable,
Yeah.
then you. I love the black church in that you have it here.
That's true. That's my testimony.
So the moral of that once again is to reach out, right? Don't feel ashamed that you don't know. Reach out and get that, like she said, network, and get those people around you so you can better equip yourself. And let's say you're not ready yet. There's books, there's resources. We just talked about it earlier where accountability is huge today because it's lacking, right? So if you need resources, get books, get go in and pay some money for a class, right? Do something, but don't say it's not out there when it is. You know what I mean?
And for people who
Speaking of
don't really
which,
know where to look, Eventbrite is a good resource. There are lots of free courses, lots of free information in the library. You can use Eventbrite, the library. You can use Facebook events, also the church.
I taught myself and I created a boot camp. Speaking of which, so this QR code is going to come up.
Awesome.
So
How did you start teaching yourself financial literacy?
I got books.
Mhm.
Rich Dad Poor Dad was my first book.
That's one of my
Absolutely.
favorite books. My
Mhm.
son and I read that book together.
Yeah, that's and then now more than ever online, there's so many resources online. So I got a couple of books, online resources, the Mint app, CNBC. Like I just literally used the resources that I had that I got, and I just taught myself over time.
You're a
Yeah.
wealth of knowledge to both of you. You hear this, people? These are resources that you can use for free, and then you can enroll in Dr. Maya's boot camp as well. Yes, sir.
And also from the last time, also we have the How Money Works Stop Being a Sucker book as well, right?
That's true.
That is if you link up here, you get it for free. You can go on Amazon and pay for it, but if you link up here, you get it for free,
Yeah.
right? So
Is there a question? The QR code. Yeah, there's a QR code for 10-year me, my boot camp. More information to come.
Is it called 10-Year Me?
10-year me.
What is the significance behind the name?
So my website and my mission is to train young people to be successful in STEM so that they can see themselves in the next 10 years as a STEM professional.
That's
So I have a financial boot camp for all sponsors and parents of that program so that they can financially prepare themselves to get their children there.
I'm gonna sign up because, as you know, I have a future astronaut who loves STEM,
Mm-hmm.
and that's
I already, he's already in my.
he's already
Yeah.
in your course for the
Yeah.
summer.
Uh-huh.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm gonna enroll in your boot camp so that I can make sure I'm fully prepared.
There
Because
you
I know
go.
college is. We're gonna need all the help we can get. Financial. Anyone want to sponsor? No, I'm just kidding. um, so as I mentioned, I share information and knowledge that I have with him, and we recently, well, not so recently, about 6 months ago, we listened to Rich Dad Poor Dad, and I have the physical book. So I stopped listening to. I'm a big Audible person, got to manage your time well. So that was how I would get my education in. I would listen in the car on the way to and from wherever we were going. So I had him to start reading the book to me because I really, really wanted to make sure he was paying attention. He would be in the back seat sleep. So I was like, you know what? I'm gonna get the physical book, and I started making him read the book to me as I was driving, and he started getting more excited about the book than me. So he could probably, if he were here right now, he's on the field trip, he could tell you some of the things that we learned in the book. But after that, I had a hard time making him go to school. I'm telling you, like, why do I have to do this? I can make money on my own.
I know
That's the blessing and the curse with that book.
that book is a blessing and a curse.
Yeah.
But there's a beauty in what he's saying,
Right.
but there's also a value in what I did in terms of getting my education. And the having both is
It's a
amazing.
plus. Facts.
I agree. I'm also educated, and I've also had an entrepreneurial journey. And so I think he already had that spirit in him because he saw me get out there and hustle and do it. But a lot of it was out of hardship, to be honest. It was a necessity during the circumstance and time frame, that I was dealing with financial hardship. I had to get out there and I had to hustle the only way I knew how to, which was to bake goods and sell them on the street corner and walk up to kids getting out of school and sell them candy. So it was real life. But he got to see that. He saw me never give up. He saw God provide, and he saw me actually tithe and offer from that money that I made, even when I was struggling to pay the rent. So he did get exposure to it in real life, and so now he still is a hustler. Like, he still wants to, Mom, I need to go. And I'm like, no, you need to focus on school. At 14, he wants to work at Publix. I'm like, no, you need to stay focused on school. So that kind of brings me to my next question, which is kind of based on like hardship, right? And trusting in God during a time of hardship, as God has promised to provide, according to Malachi. Coincidentally, happens to be my son's name, 3:10. So during a time of financial hardship, what habits can one use to help them, or what habits can couples use to help them thrive spiritually and economically?
Okay, I'll go first on that one. Humility. So I'll never forget when I finished my grad school and I quit my job in 2008. I was working as a scientist then. I literally didn't have money. I moved in faith to quit my job during the financial crash of 2008.
Wow.
Right?
I remember that. I was just finishing grad school.
Mm-hmm. And the first thing I had to do is I had to live with my mother. Right? I did not go and live a lifestyle that I could not afford. I lived in a room in my mother's house
That
at
definitely
29
takes
years old.
humility.
Yeah. You had to humble yourself, right? I'll stop there. And I won't stop. And I took a job as an adjunct professor with one class, and it only paid me $13,000 that year.
In 2009?
In 2008.
Oh, wow. That's no money.
$13,000. That's all I had with a PhD. Because I only had one class, and because I was looking for jobs. I didn't want to hook myself in. And God told me to give to. They had here the Joshua campaign back at Old Papist Church, and I said, Lord, I'm not making a lot of money, but I'm gonna give. And He took me from that $13,000 a year to what I'm making now. Because
What's next?
Listen,
Come Don't tell the whole
Praises,
testimony.
praise him.
Let's give testimony. But we're not gonna get into her finances though.
But I'll piggyback on hers and give my own experience as well, and also with that humility, let people know that I have never rented a day in my life.
Wow.
Why?
To God be the
Why?
glory.
Because I did the same thing she did.
Mom's house to my own house.
Right. So what that humility. So I had friends out there, they're renting out there, they're living there, living the life of being in freedom and all that stuff. And I said, you know what? I don't want that life where, because because I went to school for finance. So the things that you get taught a little bit there, and you got the difference between renting and owning, right? And I said, well, I don't want to rent out there because I know that's money going away from the household, right? So I said, what could I do? And I had to look at it. If I stayed home, I started my career in accounting first. I so I said, well, if I stay home and I'm making XYZ, at that time it was like 30, 40,000 a year starting out as a junior accountant, right? I could save that money and be ready to buy a house when I'm ready, right? As opposed to, and I share this with young individuals when when they're in that crossroads. I said, well, things there's things you have to sacrifice in order to get what you want, right? So you can sacrifice a little bit of freedom if you can for a year or two, save up the money and buy what you want. Now you're living free for the rest of your life, as opposed to jumping from apartment to apartment, then trying to figure out how you're going to save to get your house and work and pay the rent, things of that nature. So going back to what Maya said, it was a great point. A lot of us want to get to adulthood very fast after school, when the strategy could be stay at home for a little bit longer. Even if you got to give your parents a little something, which we do, right? Because we understand money. We're eating there, we're still, but we're adults now, we're working, right? But at the same time, what I also what I also did was I sat my parents down and let them know the game plan,
Yeah, that's important.
right? So there's an understanding there, and they can see the responsibility there. So there's a lot of maturing that has to happen also with that, when you have those financial goals that you want to achieve.
And I want to add to that, by me keeping the money in house, my mother paid off her mortgage earlier
Quicker.
because I didn't just live there for free. I
Absolutely.
gave money, but she didn't need that extra money, so she put it to the principal. If I had to give it to somebody else's, I'm paying somebody else's principal.
Mortgage,
I'm
yeah.
paying my mother's principal, but I paid it at a premium low rate because she's my mom.
So we
And on
talk
the
about
back end, generationally, that's a benefit to you
Absolutely.
because God forbid anything happens to your mom, but if when
Which
she
will.
does leave, it's coming back to
That's
you
right.
and your children and your husband.
but that's also one way to give back to your parents as well, right? So that's also another way to give back, right? Showing that gratitude and saying, hey, this is the game plan, I want to do this. And now that you have some financial knowledge, you say, okay, put this towards the principal, right? All of that, it works in one big circle, and from the concept of family too, right? Because we did talk about marriage and stuff, but that's family, right? And then you can now carry that on into your relationships.
Yes, I love that. I love everything you both just shared. I have a similar experience. It didn't work out as well. I think foundationally, it just wasn't there. My parents were not married, so I had a single mother who was a homeowner by the time I left to go to college. When I came back home from college, I had a graduate degree. Unfortunately, I came back home pregnant and I married, so I did have to move back in with my mom. For part of the time I was working, part I wasn't. So I was able to help and all this. But long story short, my mom ended up losing her home. So that kind of deteriorated that. But that would have been awesome had we been able to do that. So that's something for me to aspire to for my son. But I definitely understand the humility and the short term sacrifices for the long-term gratification, because that's something that I actually practice, and I have practiced it time and time again. Every time I have a big goal, big financial goal, God just has blessed me to put people in my life, even surrogate family members, if you will, to where I've been able to not have the full responsibility of a single parent, having to pay all the financial burdens off myself. I've been able to move in with people, pay part of their rent, and save a whole lot of money. I actually was able to go to Dubai. I got this
Nice.
person there. Not telling y'all to do that. That's not exactly financially responsible. If you can't do it, it was extra money that I made, and it was my first and only time out of the country. Um,
But I don't want to cut you there. But at the same time, I want people to understand when we talk about being financially responsible, you plan that.
yes, I did plan it.
You plan that
I
vacation,
planned.
you plan that trip.
Yeah.
So that's part of it. We still want you to live your lifestyle, right? From a financial educator standpoint, it's because most people, when you talk about being responsible financially, they think you got to live like a hermit and don't spend anything. And no, it's all about planning.
Yes.
That's the main thing about it. If you can plan for something, you plan for that major purchase. We just talked about it earlier. Don't do stuff when you're hungry, right? Don't go to the grocery store when you're hungry. Why? You're gonna spend more. Why? Because you're hungry, right? But again, it's the same thing. Being an impulse shopper doesn't help you,
No.
right? It only hurts you because you end up spending more than you should,
Yeah.
right? So when you plan accordingly, then you get to do those things, and you didn't feel a way when you got back,
I
did
did
you?
not.
Because
That's
everything
all
was paid,
everything was
right?
paid before I
A-
left.
And that's
On
how we
top of
want you
my
to live.
stuff.
That's how you want to live. You want
And
to
my
live
trip was
where
less than what it normally would have been because we planned it 6 months in advance, and we went in the off season. So I used good financial principles. Went in
that's
the
it.
off season, went with a group of people, so we got group rates on everything. I was able to share a hotel room with somebody, so I didn't have to pay the full cost. So like I was balling on the budget for real.
Balling on a budget.
Still had a good time, but I ain't have to spend all my dimes. Okay, so
Absolutely.
so I don't have any more questions for you all, but I would like for you to share what you have coming up, and how the people can reach you. So you talked about your boot camp. When is the next enrollment, and how can people contact you?
So the website, www.10year.me, you could just go there and you'll see the boot camp. I have free YouTube videos on like just what I believe helped me, the basics of first budgeting, second debt reduction. So I don't have any debt outside of my mortgage, and by God's grace, I'll be done with that in the next 2-3 years the
That's
most.
awesome.
And that's no debt, and of course investing in the stock market, etc. So those videos are on YouTube, and the boot camp just has tools that I've laid out for people. So if you're not a sponsor, you can always go to those videos. But if you want to sponsor young people in 10-year me camps, feel free to check it out.
That's awesome. We really got to get into the investment piece. We definitely may need to do a whole separate episode just about that. And what about you, Kevin? What do you have coming up?
Coming to an organization or a church near you, we do classes, we do workshops. Again, we have the books. We have several books out right now. The first one, How Money Works, Stop Being a Sucker, was the original.
That is phenomenal. What is the name of your company? When you say we, who are you speaking about?
I don't want to get into names of companies, but I'll
Okay.
tell you my website, howmoneyworks.com/Kevin Plauché.
Okay.
You can definitely check out more on there, and link up with me. We can talk about how we can come to your organization, your church, or if you need an individual retirement or individual financial needs analysis or review, we do that complimentary as well. I do that complimentary as well. Right. So if that's something that you want to get yourself off to a great start by understanding what your numbers look like, we can do that complimentary for you. And we could talk about the other books as well. We have How Money Works for women, Take Control or Lose It. We also have an ebook called Change Your Literacy, Change Your Life. and we have a new book coming out that's in the prints right now called How Money Works for the Next Generation.
I'm looking forward to that
Yeah.
one. For my
Yeah.
son.
So we have and like I said, we have presentations, we have workshops, we have programs to come to any organization, any church, any group, to share this information, because we're about education first.
Okay. So on a personal note, I will definitely be reaching out. I will be in touch with both of you for sure. But earlier or in the last episode, I heard you mention some of the tests that I will be taking. I'm very passionate about finance. I actually just got into the financial space myself. So I passed my first, got my first license in the state of Florida. And so now I'm studying for the SIE. So I will be in contact with you.
Okay, awesome.
Thank you. And so now we have a couple of questions from the audience. Just one question.
Online question.
Online.
Online audience question.
All right, I'll come around.
Okay.
I apologize.
No problem.
So, a couple of online questions. In terms of relationships, how important is it to be financially transparent with your partner?
Oh, that's a good question.
I'm gonna slide on down.
I'll talk about it from the single space. I feel like there's levels to it. So in the first couple of days, of dating, you're not going to know everything about my business, but I don't think you should.
Right.
But there are some core values you should share immediately. Core values should be shared immediately so you can know if you share these core values. And then, of course, within the 3 months to 6 months, if it starts moving to exclusivity and engagement, you got to lay it all out.
So are you talking credit score,
Yes.
payment history? The credit score will tell you
credit
that.
score, debts,
child
all of
support
that.
debt.
All of that in the engagement period. I don't
Okay.
need to. Some people say you got to know the people's credit score from the date one. No, I don't think you should.
No,
But I
don't
think you should do
that's
core
too
values.
invasive. Yeah. So,
So-
what about their money management habits? Because I mean, credit score can kind of give you insight on that, but it depends on if they have new debts or old debts, or if they have open accounts or closed accounts.
Exactly. I'm not necessarily a fan of credit scores. Credit scores this means that you borrow well, and I don't believe in a lot of borrowing.
Mhm.
Like I don't want a lot of debt. So there might be somebody who has no debt, and therefore they don't have
A
a
credit
good
score.
credit score,
Mhm.
right? So I'm looking at financial core values.
Can you
And-
before you say, Kevin? Sorry.
No, you good?
What can you name some of those? Because some of us may not know what a core value is or what a financial core value is. So are you talking about like saving, budgeting?
Right.
What are
Do
you
you
talking
do you have extreme amounts of debt?
about?
I do not.
Mhm.
Do you want to keep having lots of debt? I do not.
Mhm.
Like some people
you gotta
like
spell it out.
they like, man, just use the credit card. Just use the credit card. Like, no, I like that is a deal breaker for me.
Yeah.
Do you not believe in tithing?
Mhm.
That
That's
is-
a big one.
That is a deal breaker
Yeah.
for me, right? So that can be talked about immediately.
Yeah.
That's pretty much it. I don't need you to necessarily be investing and doing all the things that I do, but the core is no debt,
Mhm.
right? Or I don't know, I had debt at some
Mhm.
point in time,
Mhm.
but it was manageable, and I've gotten rid of most of it.
Mhm.
And I'm in that age. I don't want no more. Like, right? And who owns my resources? God does, and so I must submit to Him. Those are the two major core values.
Okay, Kevin.
No, yeah, no, that was on point. And from the marriage perspective, you have to know everything. If you're going to be a successful marriage, if it's going to be a successful marriage, you need to know everything, and it should be before you get married, right? So when, as Maya said, when you get to that engagement standpoint, that's when everything should be laid out. Because here's the thing: if you say once you say I do, that's it. So there's no going back saying, "Oh, I didn't know that."
You own that debt too, don't you?
everything.
Yeah.
And
Child support debt.
from a financial standpoint, now you're linked for life.
Mm.
So if something happens to your spouse, guess who gets it? Guess who
Both
gets
of
the
us.
debt? Because there's a myth out there that says if something happens to me, my debt just disappears, and it doesn't. It goes to your spouse.
Ooh, listen, I learned the hard way. I was married, and I learned when I went to do something on my bank account that my ex-husband was still on there as, if you will, the beneficiary of the account. I forgot what the actual term is. Maybe you know, when your spouse or someone of significance in your life is put on your placed on your account as the person who essentially becomes the successor of your account. When you die, they receive.
Yeah, it's beneficiary.
Okay, so I didn't know it was still called a beneficiary,
Yep.
but yeah, so beneficiary of my account. So I didn't realize that, and we had been divorced for like 2 years at that point. By God's grace, nothing happened to my credit score while we were married because he had horrible financial. I hope you're not
So
watching. I'm sorry.
I was gonna also say in the dating stage, questions that you can ask is what's your history with money, right? How did your family handle money? Was it a scarcity mentality, or was it a a mentality of abundance, right? These are things that you want to start to understand and pick up early, so you understand what are their spending habits, right? Because those are great indicators of who they are financially,
Yes.
right? So when you're in the dating stage, it's really about exploration, right? A lot of time we put a lot of emotions into it, which is natural, normal, but at the same time, especially when I'm speaking with my young ladies, that is the time to explore. And don't be afraid to explore, right?
So how do you do that though? Because when we're dating, we want to be wined and dined. So it's like you're not gonna be like, "Hey, don't spend any money on me," So how do you really evaluate that if you're just dating? I can see if you're exclusive because you're spending more time with that person, you're in a relationship, you're around them more often.
Yeah, I'm
It's
talking
very
about
different.
exclusivity,
Okay.
right? So on when you just getting to know that person, that comes and goes, right? So so it's a I'm impressing you at this point, right? So I'm gonna put out my best, right? When you say we're exclusive now, that's when I want to see your responsibility, right? And that's when from your perspective, if this is someone that you're looking at to marry, right?
Then I
Not
shouldn't feel a type of way. I shouldn't
right.
feel like,
You
oh,
should
he
be able to
turned his
say,
back on me.
or
You were spending all that money when we were dating. But no, look at it as them being more responsible.
if they're showing you that they're being more responsible, even with the events that you go on, right? Because there should be more dialogue at this point. Like, okay, we're gonna go to that concert. Okay, how much are the tickets? What do you have in your bank account? Are you be able to pay for that? Right? And don't be afraid to start having those conversations, because guess what? That's the same conversations you're gonna have when you're married.
Yeah, I'm nosy. Maybe because I've been married before, and I remember that was like a big headbutt situation. Like I said, my parents weren't married, so I didn't really have like that in-home example. So I was kind of learning everything on the fly. But I always had a love for finances, if you will, and some level of financial education. So I can recall having lots of conversations with my now ex-husband, and it just being dead end conversations to the point of arguments sometimes. So this time around, when I started back dating, I was like, no, I'm not going to do that. So I actually was like, show me your bank account. Let me see what you have in it. I need to see it with my eyes.
There are definitely stages to it, but absolutely, absolutely.
Oh my goodness. Okay, it's not cordless.
You gotta go around.
Well, this question is in regards to how do you account for there's a hidden aspect of when you're married to somebody, and not for me personally, I was never married, but I'm hearing cases in which extended family requires financial support, especially if you're marrying someone from overseas, and then you have to take care of their family, which blindsides a lot of people get into relationships. Like, how do you account for having a woman in your life, not realizing that she comes with a whole army? And that seems to be a major conflict and concerns with a lot of relationships in terms of they were not expecting that. That's something that blindsided them. And how would you address that in terms of someone that you have interest in from the get go without offending the person? And now, a statement is this: when it comes to finding out relationship, it's a little different between a man and a woman. The man is the provider. So, therefore, a lot of men are asking these days, what do you bring to the table? We're finding out, this is statistics, shows, you talk about going to grad school. A lot of women, they are in financial debt because of college. So a lot of them, they're in a deficit. Who's being majority of the burden when somebody's in a deficit? It's most of them. You got broke men too, but let's be honest. So that's a question that is concerning to a lot of men whenever time they're engaged with a woman, no matter how she looks good. So how do you address the first question?
So with that question, that once again goes into how deep did you go in your questioning and finding out in the dating stage, the exclusivity. Did you meet the parents? Did you meet the family? Where if you haven't met them yet, that's a problem, right? So what you don't want is surprises. Nobody wants surprises in a relationship, in a marriage, right? So you want to have a lot of conversation before you get married. So if, and this is where again we talk about getting the appropriate counseling beforehand, right? Because a counseling is not a bad thing. It gives you the tools that you're going to need to go forward in your marriage, but it's also going to uncover a lot of those things ahead of time. So by the time you do get married, a lot of the questions have already been answered. And do you know what the goal of premarital counseling is? The goal is to break you up. A lot of people don't know that, but the goal of premarital counseling is to find out if you need not to marry, right? And if you can go through that and successfully pass that, go through it, it shows you that you're at a point to be ready,
Yeah,
right?
we skipped that stage. Yes, the divorce.
And like I said before, you have to find, you don't make any presuppositions. So I have not had student loan debt for the past 15 years.
Yeah,
I've been out of debt,
that's awesome.
student loans, credit cards from in my early 30s. And so don't make the assumption that because somebody's highly educated, they have a lot of debt.
Yeah,
Because there are ways to, first of all, go through college without debt.
true.
You must know those things,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Financial
Absolutely.
literacy.
Absolutely.
And there are ways to pay off your debt over a fast period of time. Check out that QR code. I have the process,
I'm checking
right?
it out.
So there are ways. So invest in yourself.
Yeah.
That's what I did. I invested in myself quickly. That's the benefit of student loans. I invested in myself in a very relevant field that I knew I could get a good job and pay those bills. And then I'm financially literate to pay those bills. If you are in core value with me and understand that as an investment, then you'll respect it and not worry about even me bringing that debt to the table. Let's say I'm 28 and I had it, because I got rid of it real quick.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I like that. And I think, I mean, we know some of the reasons why a woman could be, some of the reasons why a woman who's highly educated could also be in a lot of student loan debt is because oftentimes there's a disproportion in the pay, but from male to female. So, they may not have the resources to be able to pay it off as quickly as a male in some instances. But also I wanted to speak to the fact that and nowadays what you see a lot of times is that the spouses of those highly educated women are willing to work with, well, what I've seen from the platforms that I've been on and the testimonies that I've seen from people I've seen, where the spouses of those well-educated women with a lot of student loan debt have actually helped them to pay it off. Not necessarily out of their own pocket, but like helped them to come up with a plan to pay down that debt, a debt elimination plan. And they've done it. And that way it doesn't hang over the head of their marriage, or either they've made that a goal of their marriage. Like, okay, before we go into this marriage, in 6 months, we're gonna make sure we pay off this debt together, or I'm gonna help you, or either help you come up with a plan for it.
Could I add one more point to that?
Yeah.
I think one of the also when it comes on to marriage is understanding your roles in the marriage, right? Um, and understanding that roles can change as it relates to philosophy and it relates to practicality. What am I saying? I run my own business. I still do the laundry. I still iron, right? There's things that I do in the house that my wife doesn't do. Why? Because we've talked about it and we have responsibilities that both of us have agreed to take on. So we have to realize that this is not the 1920s where you had one person work that could sustain a whole household and the other person stay at home and take care of kids.
That's true.
Those days are over
Yeah.
because of the cost of living and the stagnation of pay,
Yeah.
right? So if the cost of living continues to go up but pay does not, so now you need two people,
Two
two
incomes
incomes for per household,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
So you can't go with the same thought process on an old antiquated way of life to come to 2025 because it's not going to work, right? So we have to realize that as well, so that we can have a better functioning marriage and lifestyle together,
Mhm.
if that makes sense.
It does. It helps the kingdom at large. Better families, better body of Christ.
Another
There was
question?
another. Oh, go ahead.
So there's another online question. I just wanted to.
It's locked.
Yeah. I know.
Go ahead, Maya.
No. I
Oh.
was saying that there was another online question, and totally thank you for saying that because sometimes it takes a man to say
No,
it.
no, absolutely, absolutely.
Okay, so the second question is, as a single, what are the tools that one could use to be self-aware as it relates to finance? And earlier, um, I think you kind of touched on it already, and then additionally, I think someone else mentioned something.
The concept of self-awareness is to know your numbers. In healthcare, you got to know your numbers. How's your sugar? How's your blood pressure?
Hmm.
Right? What's going on? Know your numbers. And mint.com was an awesome app that transformed my life. When I found out that I was negative $4,000 as a net worth, that's when I made a drastic shift, right? Because I found that I learned the numbers. So now mint.com, they got rid of it. It's
You
sad.
can use Rocket Money now.
But Rocket Money has a cost to it.
Well, they got a free part too.
But it doesn't, it's not full. So it
Yeah.
doesn't, I feel like with Rocket Money, they don't let, anyway, I don't, I there was some, I'm frugal, I find
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Empower does what Mint does. Like you
Empower.
can find out your Empower. Yeah. I found,
Empower.com.
Do you have to have an account,
Okay. So we
before-
have Rocket.
you don't have to have a
a retirement
A retirement account,
Okay,
nope.
all right.
they
So we
have
have
a
Empower.com,
Mhm. And
Rocket.com,
Rocket Money.
Rocket Money.
Those are
and that's
apps.
the event.
Those are
Okay.
apps. howmoneyworks.com/Kevin Plochet.
Do you guys want to leave any additional resources for the audience online or in house before we wrap things up?
Just one other question.
Just how they could get started, like maybe an investment.
Just one other question from me. One of the things that I realize is that different people have different money mindset, right? They have different mindset about their money. How can they be more aware of that? And then in a relationship sense, is it okay for them to say, well, I'm weak here, so can you be the strength in that area, and vice versa?
Aren't there online tools like quizzes people can take to determine where they are?
I'm sure they are. But to answer the question directly, there's two things. I said this before the last time. There's two subjects that we don't learn in school that we have the most problems with when we're in real life: money and relationships. Right. So what am I saying? I'm saying that takes sitting down and being vulnerable with each other to say, okay, I'm strong in this area, I'm weaker in this area, but I'm strong in that area that you're weak in. So the compromise is not that I will take it over, but I will teach you along the way, right? Because a lot of times what we think when we're stronger in one area, no, I'll just take it over. But what happens there, especially when it comes on to finances, because when you have, let's say the wife is weaker, the male is stronger, what ends up happening, and this is what we see all the time when we come in, the husband dies. And now you have a wife who doesn't know anything about the numbers. And so now you have to pick up the pieces there and try to figure it out. So in that in to answer your question is find out what those strengths and weaknesses are, and then the idea, that's why we get married, right? That's one of the reasons why we get married, is to help us each other get stronger
Yes.
in those areas, right? So if there's an area that I can help you with and you're vulnerable enough to allow me to help you, and you help me, then we both become better, because now I have a little bit of understanding on finances now because my husband taught me or my wife taught me, right? And what better person to learn from than the person you're gonna spend your entire life with, right? So that's what I would say to that.
Excellent point and excellent way to wrap this up. Thank you all for tuning in to Faith Talk. Our next episode will discuss nutritional health. And you know where to find us here on YouTube. Have a wonderful day.